A fresh legal controversy is building around the conviction and life sentence of indigenous people of Biafra IPOB leader Nnamdi Kanu, with a lawyer representing his global legal consortium warning that the case could have serious consequences for Nigeria's judiciary. The lawyer, Onyedikachi Ifedi, made the claim in Umuahia while speaking about Kanu's pending appeal against his conviction by Justice James Omotosho of the Federal High Court in Abuja. Ifedi described the judgment as a major constitutional and legal controversy, arguing that the conviction was based on a law that had already been repealed. He also accused the Nigerian government of refusing to respond to Kanu's appeal, suggesting that the authorities were avoiding a legal challenge that could expose weaknesses in the conviction. According to the lawyer, the case has moved beyond the question of Kanu himself and now raises broader questions about the application of criminal law and constitutional safeguards in Nigeria. He argued that the judiciary could face serious scrutiny depending on how the appellate courts handle the case. The Nigerian judiciary and the federal government stand on the precipice of an ineligible disgrace, Ifedi said, arguing that Kanu's case had exposed what he described as a constitutional crisis. He insisted that the issue was not simply a technical legal argument, but a question of whether a person could lawfully be convicted under legislation that was no longer in force. The lawyer specifically challenged the reliance on what he described as a savings clause in the judgment. According to him, a savings clause cannot replace an existing criminal law under which a person can be convicted. Ifedi maintained that Kanu and his defense team had consistently argued that the law used in the case had been repealed. He questioned why the Nigerian government had allegedly not responded to the appeal filed by Kanu. The lawyer argued that the government's failure to join issues in the appeal had raised further questions about the prosecution's position. He said the authorities had moved quickly when seeking Kanu's conviction, but were allegedly reluctant to engage with the legal challenge to that conviction. They were in a hurry to convict. They are running from accountability, Ifedi alleged. He argued that the appeal would ultimately test whether the conviction could withstand judicial scrutiny at the appellate court. The lawyer also raised questions about the competence of the judiciary in handling the legal issues surrounding the case. He suggested that if the problem arose from a misunderstanding of the law, it would raise concerns about judicial competence. If, on the other hand, the legal provisions were understood but deliberately disregarded, he argued that the implications would be even more serious. Ifedi said the appellate courts would face difficult choices when determining Kanu's appeal. He argued that upholding the conviction could generate significant constitutional questions, while overturning it could expose serious weaknesses in the original judgment. He also warned against what he described as attempts to use legal technicalities to sustain the conviction. The lawyer's central argument revolves around the relationship between the repealed law under which Kanu was originally prosecuted and the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act, TPPA, which subsequently became the relevant legislation. Ifedi cited Section 97 and Section 36 sub 12 of the Constitution in advancing his argument. He maintained that Section 36 sub 12 requires a criminal conviction to be based on a written law that was in force at the time of the alleged offense and conviction. He argued that the transition provisions under Section 97 require the relevant precedents to continue under the applicable legislation. According to him, those provisions were not adequately applied in Kanu's case. A man was convicted under a law that did not exist, Ifedi alleged. He also referred to the judgment's discussion of the legal status of repeal legislation, arguing that the reasoning contained in the judgment could create an internal contradiction. The lawyer said the case could become a significant test of Nigeria's criminal justice system. He warned that the appellate courts would face intense scrutiny from Nigerians and international observers as they determine the validity of the conviction. The controversy comes amid renewed demands from Kanu's family that his appeal should be heard without further delay. The Kanu family recently called on the relevant judicial authorities to immediately list Kanu's pending cases. The family said Kanu had written to the Chief Justice of Nigeria and the President of the Court of Appeal requesting action on his cases. According to the family, the requests were motivated by what they describe as prolonged delays surrounding Kanu's detention, conviction, and life sentence. The family also alleged that the Nigerian government had shown little willingness to join issues in the appeal. Kanu's legal battle has remained one of the country's most politically sensitive cases, attracting attention from supporters of the Biafran cause, civil society groups, lawyers, and international observers. His supporters have consistently argued that his prosecution and continued detention raise fundamental questions about due process, constitutional rights, and the treatment of separatist movements. The Nigerian government has maintained its position against Kanu and has prosecuted him over terrorism-related allegations. The latest intervention by Ifedi is therefore likely to intensify the debate surrounding the conviction, particularly as the case moves through the appellate process. At the heart of the controversy is a simple but potentially far-reaching legal question. Can a person be convicted under a criminal law that had already been repealed? That question could become central to Kanu's appeal and could determine whether the conviction survived the next stage of judicial review. The legal battle is therefore no longer being presented simply as a dispute involving one defendant. Ifedi is framing it as a test of the Nigerian Constitution, the authority of the courts, and the limits of criminal prosecution. The outcome of the appeal could have consequences beyond Kanu himself, particularly if the appellate courts are required to clarify how Nigerian courts should treat criminal proceedings affected by changes or repeals in legislation. Until the appeal is heard and determined, the argument made by Kanu's legal team and the government's position remains subject to judicial determination. What is certain is that the controversy surrounding Nnamdi Kanu's conviction is entering another critical phase, with growing pressure on the appellate courts to address the legal questions surrounding the judgment. For more updates, stay with us on News Express. I am Cassie Tony.